Hello and welcome to Medical Radicast, your source for news and radical ideas about medicine and healthcare. To my more conservative listeners, some ideas will be radical because they diverge from mainstream medicine. To my more alternatively inclined listeners, some ideas will be radical because they merge with mainstream. Either way, stay tuned, listen in, appreciate something known, and learn something new. I'm your host, Mitchell Cohn, Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine and Medical Radical. Welcome to the first podcast episode of Medical Radicast. We're here to inform, entertain, inspire you to take action to improve your life, your health, your community, the environment, the world we all share. It's all connected. Why do I say that? Well, I always say it's all connected because it is. Now, what do I mean by it's all connected? Well, let's look at some other people's ideas. Neil deGrasse Tyson, he says, quote, "We are all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, and to the rest of the universe atomically. That's kind of cool," unquote. Well, I think we are all connected as well, and that's basically because of my osteopathic philosophy. We will talk later on more about what an osteopath is and what it means to have an osteopathic philosophy. A lot of people are familiar with the concept of mind, body, and spirit interconnectedness, or what a lot of people refer to as the holistic approach to healthcare. And again, we'll talk about what holistic means to me later, and maybe we'll get some feedback in the future from some of you listeners. Osteopathically, we talk about literally everything in the body being connected. And I'm going to give you just a real basic example of what that means. The cranium, or head, is actually connected to the soles of your feet. And most people have heard the song, "The ankle bone's connected to the nose bone," or whatever it's connected to. But the truth is, it really is. Let me just give you one way. Your head is actually not a solid rock, contrary to what some of your spouses might tell you. It's actually made up of a bunch of bone plates that move and float like tectonic plates over your brain on a sea of cerebrospinal fluid. Now, there are muscles attaching to that cranium. Let's say the muscles that attach to the back of your head. They're the muscles that allow you to tip your head and look up at that beautiful sky. But those muscles are also attached out to your shoulders, which attach to your arms. They're also attached down your back to your ribs, to your vertebrae, and through the vertebrae on down to your pelvis through a big sheet of white connective tissue, which is medically called the thoracolumbar aponeurosis, but it's just a big white sheet of tissue. But it connects your back to your pelvic bone and your sacrum. And your pelvis then is connected to the hips, which attach down through the bones, the muscles, the tissues to your knees and on down all the way to the bottoms of your feet. So if you have twists and turns in the connective tissue, tightness in the muscles, it changes the way you walk. It changes the way your sacrum sits between your pelvis. It changes the way your vertebrae function on up to your head. So everything is all connected. Now that's just one example. That doesn't include all the fluid highways, the veins, the arteries, the lymphatic vessels, and neurologic connections that ferry all the chemicals of life, oxygen, your hormones, etc., throughout our bodies. So there are many more ways that we are connected, but think of the body as being connected fingertip to fingertip, and from the very top of your head to the soles of your feet. And again, we will cover that more in future podcasts. Now, coming back to this idea of my philosophy, it's completely osteopathic, which is completely holistic. That's what osteopathic medicine is. A lot of people think of naturopaths or chiropractors when they talk about holistic medicine. But the only truly holistic medicine, which means we encompass all the forms of medical diagnosis, all the forms of medical treatment, is osteopathic medicine. Again, we'll go into more detail on that shortly. But think of merging deGrasse Tyson's ideas with the basis of osteopathic principles, which is the mind, the body, the spirit make us whole, but we are also connected to other individuals. We're connected to our local communities. We have an impact on our environment. And what really worries me, and which we will also cover in the future, is we are the only animal with the power to damage or completely destroy part or all of our environment. So that imbues us with, as Spider-Man or whichever great philosopher actually said it first, with great power comes great responsibility. And sometimes we don't act too responsibly. That will be a subject of some of our future discussions. But we're connected through our environment to our whole world. For example, we do not just have an impact on the world, it has an impact on us. And we have an impact on the universe, and the universe has an impact on us. Cosmic rays and sunspots impact us. They change and affect our weather patterns. They damage skin from UV, and we have an effect on their effects by depleting the ozone or raising carbon dioxide levels. By making these changes, we impact ourselves, we impact our oceans, we're acidifying them, we're irradiating them. If anybody remembers Fukushima, we pollute them with massive amounts of things like oil, if anyone can think Deep Horizon in the Gulf of Mexico. We weird out the jet stream, although some of that's due to the universe, meaning change in sunspots. That has an effect also on the warming and cooling of the earth and the weird weather patterns we've been experiencing over the last year or two. We affect, through our actions, all other plant and animal species. The effects we have on these other plant and animal species changes their activity and their availability. For example, the damage we do to the oceans affects the amount of fish available, and that affects us, and it forces lifestyle changes that we must undergo, and we therefore make changes that affect the earth. And the web goes on and on and on. Now, Carl Sagan always used to like to say, "We are made of the stuff of stars." And by that he actually meant that without stars and supermassive stars forming all of the heavy elements and then going nova or supernova and scattering those elements throughout the universe, we would not have the building blocks to make anything else. We wouldn't have carbon, we wouldn't have oxygen, nitrogen, or anything of the type. All we would have is hydrogen. So the fact that we exist proves that we are made of the stuff of stars. We have already had asteroid impacts change the course of life on Earth, killing off the dinosaurs and essentially resulting in us. Now, who knows what impact we will have? We already have some on space. For instance, the space junk, little bits and pieces as well as the large pieces of space junk that surround our Earth have now made it next to impossible to easily navigate the space around the Earth. We're always watching out for impacts. So what bigger impacts may we have on the universe in the future? Well, the point is, guaranteed, it is all connected. Now, who am I? I'm Mitchell Cohn, D.O. D.O. stands for Doctor of Osteopathy or Doctor of Osteopathic Medicine. I'm an osteopathic physician. I received my osteopathic medical degree from the University of Osteopathic Medicine and Health Sciences in Des Moines, Iowa in 1986. I have had postgraduate training in family medicine, biomechanics, and osteopathic manipulative medicine at Michigan State University. I've been the founder and chief medical legal consultant for 2 legal medicine consulting firms over the years, and I currently practice OMM, or osteopathic manipulative medicine, which is also sometimes known as OMT, osteopathic manipulative treatment or therapy. And I do prolotherapy, which we'll talk about in the future. Altogether, that means I basically do a lot of treatment of acute and chronic pain, and that practice is located in Grand Rapids and Kalamazoo, Michigan. I'm also an author. I've seen my works published. I had one article published in the Triad Legal Journal. It was called Protect Yourself from Your Experts. That was quite a number of years ago when I was doing the medical legal consulting actively. I'm also an award-winning author, and by award-winning, I mean, well, I got a little tiny recognition. I like to be self-aggrandizing. But I got a little recognition for a couple of science fiction, fantasy short stories that were published in small writing journals. I'm also a speaker. I like to speak to high school, college, pre-medical students, medical professionals, and pain patients and introduce them to the advantages of osteopathic medicine principles and practice. And aside from osteopathic medicine per se, I really, really, really want to emphasize returning humanity back to healthcare. I am an advocate for osteopathic, holistic, and what I like to term sensible medicine with humanity as its basis. Humanity is, or at least should be, the core of medicine. But today we're lost. We're lost in technology. We've lost our human connection. Now, it's radical to think we should get humanity back into medicine. It's radical to think we should get doctors and patients back in touch with one another, and we should make technology secondary to the doctor-patient interaction. But we are controlled. Healthcare is controlled by corporate America, by big pharma, by big tech, medical device companies, by government, by insurance companies, by lawyers. We're not even talking about the medical malpractice debacle that has occurred over the last couple of decades. But there are so many medical legal issues, HIPAA, etc., that we really don't have much in the way of respect for the physicians who take care of us. Now, I am speaking both as a physician and as a patient, and I have some doozies of stories regarding my experiences as a patient. I will talk about those in the future as well, and they were not pleasant. Actually, all of these other entities, pharma, tech, government, insurance, lawyers, they control the practice of medicine. Doctors and patients, we've lost that control. Now, the question is, why would you want to listen to this podcast in the future? And that goes back to the original question that really is the basis of all life. And that question is, what's in it for me? So why would you want to do anything? It's always, what's in it for me? Well, let me start with why I want to do this podcast. First of all, I'm full of it. I'm full of info. I'm full of things to say. I'm full of opinions, and I certainly believe everyone is entitled to mine. I always thought everyone was entitled to my opinion. I want a chance to reach more people and talk with them about things that are important to me. I'm tired of being just a doctor and a professional held to a higher and stuffier standard of human action. I want a chance to be me. And I need to entertain. I'm a ham without a home, a little piggy without even a house of straw. So I'll make a home in cyberspace and invite all my friends and the occasional wolf over to visit. I also am a big believer in the golden rule, or karma, or whatever you want to call it. What goes around comes around. I want to put some important things out there and help people by doing that. So there's a touch of altruism, and we almost all have it. I know a couple of people who may be lacking a little in altruism, but most of us want to do good things and help other people. That's why I do it. Now the question is, what's in it for you? Well, hopefully you'll get some entertainment. I certainly hope you'll get some enlightenment, and I promise to give you some challenges to think, to participate, and to take action to help yourself or to help those you care about, to help our environment, to help our world. I'll also give you a chance to talk back and tell me I'm wrong. All right. I'll tell you how to contact me at the end of the show. I want you to tell me your medical experiences, your needs, your wishes, your gripes. Now, I also will occasionally have a guest host. Hopefully, we'll be able to do the occasional interview. My lovely wife, Elena, will be our hopefully frequent co-host and engineer, and she's a podcaster in her own right of the soon-to-be-released Verbal Vigilante podcast. Let's take a little break. And we're back. I do want to discuss a few features that I hope we will have in future podcasts. We may have others, but for the time being, I'm just going to run through a couple of ideas I have, and feel free to give me some feedback on these. The first is called Tech Check. In Tech Check, we'll discuss new and old technologies, advantages, disadvantages, absurdities, questionable necessities, costs, and what does the technology replace, or what does it really do better than we can do with our hands, or getting history, or through more traditional ways of practicing medicine. Truthfully, I am a strong believer as an osteopathic physician that a great deal can be done to improve healthcare and taking care of patients just by talking with them and doing a really good physical exam. But some medications make a great deal of sense. Some technologies make a great deal of sense. But there are so many that I either don't use or would never use or would not recommend, and hopefully we'll have a chance to talk about those. Another feature I expect to have is called the Osteopathic Moment. In the Osteopathic Moment, we'll have discussions on an osteopathic principle or an OMM moment, an osteopathic manipulative medicine moment, a success. We may even play audios of people who had success or read some stories from some of our listeners. We will have radical rips. Those are my gripes. I may feature some other people's gripes on anything I want. I want to keep it related to health, physical, mental, spiritual, hospital experiences, etc. We will also have In the News, where we will cover some recent stories regarding health-related topics, discoveries, tests, vaccines, data, whatever is in the news, and the effects that this may have on our lives, either now or in the future. We will also have, at times, the survival scenario. We'll talk about zombie apocalypse, disasters, things that can happen to you in the wilderness. I already have some stories from a book that I've written called Osteopathy in the Zombie Apocalypse. That's an exciting title, but it actually is pretty fun, and it's pretty highly rated on Amazon. We will also have what we call CAM Corner. CAM stands for Complementary and Alternative Medicine, for those of you who are not aware. We will talk about complementary and alternative medicine, new information, testing, some old wives' tales. We'll talk about precautions with using complementary and alternative medicine in some places where it may be advantageous to use these particular techniques. We will also have the occasional quote or quip about medicine. Let's take another break. The first, I suppose, major question that I need to answer before we end today's podcast is, what the hell is an osteopathic physician? We will have a great deal more of this in the future podcasts. You'll get the idea. But what I should point out, first of all, is that depending who you're quoting, between 7 and 10% of all physicians in the United States are osteopathic physicians. Your own doctor might be one, and you don't even know it, because we're all called doctor. It doesn't matter whether you're an MD or a DO. You're still called a doctor. But I do want to make some distinctions between a doctor of osteopathy versus an MD, medical doctor, which you will sometimes hear me refer to as an allopath. And if there's any MDs out there listening, I do not mean any disrespect. It is a common term that osteopathic physicians use simply to make it clear whether we're talking about a DO or an MD. And we will also talk about things like chiropractic physicians. And basically, one of my readers, I think, put it most succinctly. They made this equation: MD plus super chiropractor plus holistic philosophy equals a DO. I just think that's great. There's nothing an MD can do that a DO can't, And DOs can also do much more because we can also do a lot of hands-on work. There's nothing a chiropractor can do that a DO can't, and much more because a DO can also order all the diagnostic tests, prescribe medications, perform surgeries, etc. There is actually kind of an interesting history about how DOs came to be, and at some point in the future we will probably talk about Dr. Andrew Taylor Still, who was an MD back in the late 1800s, who was fed up with the fact that many of the medications that were being used, many of the treatments that were being used, like giving arsenic for infections, were actually killing the patients. But we'll go into that in the future. For the moment, I think I'd like to tell a little story about the first time that I understood what holistic medicine really meant, what holism was. Many years ago, before I was a physician, there was a woman who had been suffering severe chest pains. Thought she was having heart problems. She and her son went to the MD, who sat her down and did a physical examination, and he couldn't find anything wrong with her. Now remember, we talked about mind, body, and spirit all being interrelated. This MD said to the woman, "Tell me what's really wrong. Why are you hurting?" And the woman said, "Okay, but I need my son to leave the room." And this very intelligent man said, "I don't think so," and said, "Son, you stay here." So the doctor talked with the woman, and the woman poured out her worst inner turmoil, which really was focused on the fact that she wanted her son to go into medicine and he had other plans. And when she was finally done discussing this with the doctor, all her chest pain was gone. The doctor had approached her problem, not just her physical problem, but the problem that was related to it, with discussion, with humanity. And it should be noted that since that time, Mom is fine, and so am I. I did go on to medical school the way she wanted. Anyway, I mentioned that I have written a book, which we will be using some excerpts from, called Osteopathy in the Zombie Apocalypse. I've written another book called Quotes, Quips, and Odd Little Bits about osteopathy and medicine, which also does very nicely on Amazon. Or you can go to one of my websites, mitchellcohn.com. That's MITCHELLCOHN, all one word, .com. And you can take a look, see if those are something you're interested in. Hopefully you will have learned something from today's episode. Before we sign off, I want you to know your feedback, comments, concerns, even personal stories are welcome. I would love to hear from you. You can either write to me, Dr. Mitchell Cohn, at Medical Radicast at medicalradical.com. That's MEDICALRADICAST, all one word again, at medicalradical.com. Or you can call and leave your feedback, comment, or story as a voice message on our Skype line at 734-931-MRAD. That's 734-931-6723. Your voice may even make it onto a future podcast. I'd also like to add a shout out and a huge thank you to Cliff Ravenscraft, the podcast answer man at podcastanswerman.com. I never could have gotten this podcast produced or even begun without the knowledge Cliff freely gives out at his website. His free videos got me to believe the idea that I too could do podcasting. I invested in the equipment he recommended and studied all of his free videos to produce this, my first podcast. And no, he is not paying me for saying this. So thanks, Cliff, and I recommend Podcast Answerman to anyone interested in producing their own podcast. Thanks for listening to Medical Radicast. I hope you've learned something you didn't know before, been entertained along the way, and will now maybe even take action to improve your health or healthcare, whether doing a little research, looking for a new doctor, or even just being willing to ask more questions to the people you've trusted with your healthcare for so long. Your health is in your hands, and that, my friends, is a radical idea. It's been my pleasure to be your host on the Medical Radicast. I look forward to speaking with you next time. This is Mitchell Cohn, D.O., the Medical Radical.